There was a time in America when dinner wasn't about flavor. It was about survival. Families gathered around kitchen tables with empty pantries, making meals from whatever scraps they could find. The Great Depression wasn't just an economic collapse. It was a test of creativity, resilience, and heart. Mothers learned to stretch a single potato into a family feast. Children learned the taste of vinegar pies and dandelion greens. And through it all, the American spirit refused to starve. Tonight, we're taking a step back in time, to the kitchens of 1930s America, to rediscover 5 forgotten Great Depression dishes that fed millions. They weren't fancy, they weren't pretty, but they told a story, one of hope, hunger, and the courage to make something out of nothing. They called it Hoover Stew, not out of affection, but out of frustration. A meal that carried the name of the president many blamed for the Great Depression. Hoover Stew was a staple in the soup kitchens that dotted America's cities during the early 1930s. Named after President Herbert Hoover, it was a hodgepodge dish made from whatever could be found. Usually macaroni, canned tomatoes, hot dogs, and sometimes corn or beans. In the worst years of the Depression, recipes weren't followed. They were improvised. Families mixed whatever ingredients the local relief centers could spare. At government-funded feeding centers, volunteers would stir large vats of stew, dishing out to lines of hungry men, women, and children clutching tin cups and old bowls. The aroma of boiled macaroni and canned vegetables filled the air, a smell that for many meant one more day of survival. Hoover Stew wasn't about taste. It was about sustenance. It kept people alive when the concept of a balanced meal was more dream than reality. Yet somehow, in its humble simplicity, it became a symbol of solidarity. Families would eat it together, neighbors would share it, and even in the hardest times, people found comfort in a warm bowl of something, anything. What's heartbreaking is how the dish itself became a quiet protest, a meal born from blame. Every spoonful was a reminder of the broken promises of prosperity, and yet people survived. They adapted, they shared, and in doing so, they created a dish that's more than food. It's a snapshot of endurance. And while Hoover Stew kept families fed, others turned to a dish even stranger, one that used an unexpected substitute when milk ran out and eggs were nowhere to be found. Next up, the Depression cake. Imagine baking a cake without eggs, without milk, and without butter during the Great Depression. That wasn't a quirky recipe. It was survival on a plate. In the 1930s, staples like eggs, milk, and butter were luxury items for most families. But birthdays, church gatherings, and Sunday dinners still called for something sweet. Out of that longing for normalcy came the Depression cake, also known as war cake or wacky cake. Mothers across America mixed up batches using what they did have: flour, sugar, water, vinegar, and baking soda. The vinegar reacted with the soda to help the cake rise, creating a soft crumb without any eggs or dairy. A dash of cinnamon or cocoa powder, if available, could transform it into a treat that felt almost indulgent, a small victory in hard times. The Depression cake became more than dessert. It was a reminder that even in scarcity, there was room for celebration. It was baked for soldiers leaving home, for children's birthdays, and for the simple joy of sharing something sweet after a day of struggle. Families passed a recipe by word of mouth, handwritten on scraps of paper, or even printed in church newsletters. For many, the smell of that cake baking was a symbol of hope, proof that they could still create comfort in the face of loss. Some children grew up never tasting real butter or eggs, yet they remembered that cake for the rest of their lives. It wasn't just about dessert, it was about dignity and the determination to keep joy alive when the world seemed joyless. And while some found hope in a slice of cake, others found creativity in the simplest of ingredients, taking something as plain as potatoes and turning them into breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Next up, potato pancakes, the working man's meal. They say necessity is the mother of invention, and nowhere was that truer than the Great Depression kitchen, where a single potato could become a full meal. In the 1930s, potatoes were cheap, filling, and easy to grow, a humble crop that kept families alive when meat and bread were out of reach. Housewives and farmers alike found endless ways to stretch the spud's potential, but one recipe became a staple: the potato pancake. Made from grated potatoes, a pinch of flour, and sometimes an egg, If you could spare one, the mixture was fried in whatever grease was available. Some used bacon drippings. Others, vegetable oil saved from a week's worth of cooking. It was crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and when paired with onions or applesauce, it became a comforting meal that felt almost like luxury. Potato pancakes filled stomachs when cupboards were bare. They were cheap to make, easy to prepare, and adaptable for any family, no matter how poor. Rail workers, farmers, and factory men carried them in lunch pails, wrapped in newspaper to eat on the go. The dish represented resilience, a food that worked as hard as the people who made it. For many children of the Depression, these potato pancakes were more than food. They were a taste of home. Some families made them every night. Others only on Sundays when they could afford an extra onion. And though times have changed, for those who lived it, the memory of those golden, sizzling cakes still carries the smell of struggle, perseverance, and love. And while potatoes could stretch a family's food supply, others turned to the simplest greens growing right in their backyards, finding dinner hidden in the fields and sidewalks of America. Next up, Dandelion Salad, the garden you didn't plant. In the darkest days of the Great Depression, food wasn't always found in the pantry. Sometimes it grew between the cracks in the sidewalk. When store shelves were bare and wages had vanished, Americans turned to the land. Not just farms, but front yards, empty lots, and even roadsides. The dandelion, once dismissed as a pesky weed, suddenly became a lifeline. Its young leaves were tender, bitter, and full of vitamins that many families desperately needed. Rural families had long known the value of wild greens, but by the 1930s, even city dwellers were foraging. Mothers taught their children how to recognize the safe plants from the poisonous ones. Dandelion leaves were boiled, fried in a bit of grease, or served raw with a splash of vinegar or bacon fat dressing. For many, this simple salad meant the difference between hunger and nourishment. Dandelion salad wasn't just cheap, it was free. In an era where every penny counted, families learned to see food where others saw weeds. It became a symbol of resourcefulness, a reminder that survival didn't always come from a grocery store. Church groups even organized foraging walks, teaching communities how to harvest nature's pantry. There's something hauntingly beautiful about that. The image of mothers and children picking dinner from an open field, their laughter mingling with the fear of the times. They made salads from weeds, soups from bones, and hope from hardship. Today, few would think to eat a dandelion leaf, but for those who lived through the Depression, every bite carried the taste of pride, resilience, and survival. And while some Americans turned to the earth for their meals, others found warmth in something far simpler, a single slice of bread and a bit of sugar. Next up, bread and milk soup, the poor man's comfort. For some families during the Great Depression, dinner was nothing more than a slice of bread floating in a bowl of warm milk. But to them, it was comfort, the taste of survival. Bread and milk soup was one of the simplest and most widespread meals of the 1930s. It appeared on kitchen tables from New York City to the Great Plains, born out of necessity when meat, vegetables, and even butter were scarce. Families poured warm milk over torn pieces of day-old bread, often adding a sprinkle of sugar or a pat of margarine if they were lucky. This dish wasn't new. Versions had existed for centuries in Europe, but during the Depression, it became an American staple. It filled hungry stomachs with warmth and softness, a small comfort on nights when the cupboards echoed empty. Some even called it poor man's pudding, because it was often served as both dinner and dessert. Bread and milk soup mattered because it gave people dignity. It turned scraps into sustenance and hunger into hope. Parents would pretend it was a special treat for their children, not because they believed it, but because they wanted their kids to feel safe. In that sense, this humble meal was more than food. It was love served with a spoon. Decades later, many who grew up during the Depression still remember the sound of milk being poured into those chip bowls. It wasn't fancy, but it was filling. It was survival, and in many ways, it was a taste of America's endurance. The same spirit that carried a nation through bread lines, dust storms, and hardship, one simple bowl at a time. And when you think about it, these meals weren't just about food. They were about strength, about the way families held on to hope, even when there was nothing left to hold. When we look back at the Great Depression, it's easy to focus on the poverty, the breadlines, and the struggle. But hidden inside every kitchen, in every chip bowl and battered pot, was something much greater. It was ingenuity, love, and the will to keep going. These forgotten dishes, Hoover Stew, depression cake, potato pancakes, dandelion salad, and bread and milk soup, weren't just recipes. They were lifelines. They carried families through nights of hunger, through winters without heat, and through a time when America itself felt uncertain. Each bite told a story, of mothers stretching one potato to feed 6 mouths, of children laughing over a bowl of bread and milk, of neighbors sharing what little they had. In those humble kitchens, the real recipe for survival wasn't food. It was faith, community, and the unshakable belief that tomorrow would be better. So as we sit down to our own meals today, surrounded by abundance, maybe we can take a moment to remember those who came before us, the ones who proved that you don't need much to make something meaningful. Just a little food, a little fire, and a whole lot of heart, because that's the taste of the America we remember. If you enjoyed this look back in time, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves history as much as you do. This has been the America we remember, and we'll see you in the next story from our past.